It again. Do you
Workbooks
hear
in
the
Excel
sound?
and Office 365, or perhaps once you're completed, you may want to share the workbook with others. There's a number of different ways to do this. We're going to explore them in this chapter, beginning in this movie with the most popular option, that's sharing online. When you share online, you send out an invitation to people to access your workbook. You give them a link, they open it up, and you can all be editing the same workbook simultaneously. Let's see how it's done. The first step is to make sure that your workbook is saved online. In other words, to the cloud. We're going to work with a completed version of our Red 30 Projected Revenues Workbook, R30 Revenues '03 Final in the Chapter 3 folder of your exercise files if you're catching up. I want to share this with people. The easiest way is to go up to the Share button up here in the top right-hand corner. Now, clicking this will give me access to my options for sharing and saving to the cloud. You can see because I'm in an organization that uses Office 365, I have access to OneDrive in the organization, in this case, Red 30. I also have access to my own personal OneDrive. If you have a Microsoft account, well, you need one to log into Office 365. You'll see your credentials up here. You also have some free cloud storage. Every account comes with some, and you can buy more if you need it. So it could be an old Hotmail account, Outlook.com, for example, or in an organization that's using SharePoint or Exchange servers, for example. All of these options give you access to cloud storage. So all you need to do is select the one you want. I'm going to go with my OneDrive here in the organization. It takes a moment to put it up there in the cloud. And once it's there, you can start sending out links. And there are many options to choose from when doing so. First, though, you'll see a flashing cursor waiting for you to type in the names of the people you want to share with. Could be contacts in your Outlook address book, for example, or it could be simply email addresses. I'm going to send one outside the company to a person named Karen L. Rivers at hotmail.com. There she is, selecting her, pops her in there as one of the people who's going to receive the link. I can add additional people now if I wanted to. Let's keep it simple, just sharing with one person. Up above, now I can choose what type of access they're going to have and who. So clicking anyone with this link can edit. That's the default. Anyone who knows the link is going to be able to edit. If you want to restrict access, give this a click. You can see you can have just people in your organization. So their email will have to be an internal email address. Or you can see we can share with people who already have access or narrow it down to specific people. That's what I want to select. And then down below, you can see the type of access. By default, they'll be able to edit. But if you only want them viewing as a read only, deselect that checkbox. They won't be able to edit. I do want Karen to be able to go in here and make corrections. So clicking apply is going to do a couple of things. Takes me back where I see the change at the top. I can add additional people. I'll see a warning if they're outside the organization, just a reminder. And now I'm ready to send. Clicking send is not sending the actual workbook, but rather a link to it where it's stored in the cloud. And I see that it's been sent, so I can close this up. All right. Once it's been sent, a couple things change on your user interface. First of all, up here in the top left-hand corner, the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar looks a little bit different now, doesn't it? It's got that double circular arrow showing up in the bottom right corner of it, and that's to remind you that this is actually stored online. It's not stored locally. And you might also see autosave is on. That's the default, meaning as I make changes and once Karen gets in there and starts making changes, they'll automatically be updated and saved for me because they're in the cloud. Nice little feature. So once she starts working on this, I'll know exactly where she is. She'll know where I am. Let's see what it's like to receive an invitation. Here's a message that's come from Karen Leslie, and it looks like she wants me to fill out whatever I can in this budget. There's that optional message. There's the title of the email I shared, the name of the file with you in OneDrive. Now I have two options: to click this link to open it up, or to actually view it in OneDrive where I can open it up with Excel, for example, or Excel Online. You don't even have to have Excel if you're receiving an invitation to a file. It'll open up using Excel Online using your default browser. Let's check it out. I'm going to click the link, launches my browser, and accesses Excel Online. I can see the file now. All right. I can edit this if I want in my browser. In other words, I don't need to download it and open it up in Excel. That would be a copy anyway. Let's go to Edit in Browser. There's Excel Online and the ribbon shows up. It's not full functionality, but it's pretty good functionality. And now I can see Karen Leslie's now editing this workbook. And as she moves around making changes, I'm going to see her cell selection as well as my own. She sees mine at her end. Can also come up here to click this drop down to see exactly where they are. Karen's in cell B8. Sure enough, that's the one that's highlighted. So I can come in here and start adding content if I wanted to, just by clicking the cell where I want to edit. I'm going to type in 400, press enter. She's seeing that at her end instantaneously. That's the beauty of sharing online. Now, when I'm done, everything's being updated automatically. I really only have to go up here and close up my browser and switch back to Excel now to return to my own workbook. So this is now the most popular way to share your workbooks in Excel here in Office 365 by using the cloud. You can send links to people to have them view your contents, but if you want them to edit, even collaborate with you, you can be working with multiple people on the same workbook simultaneously. When you're not necessarily interested in sharing your workbook online, you may want to simply send a copy of it to someone or many people via email, and that too can be done. A nice little feature is the ability to convert it to PDF along the way. So you're actually sending a read-only copy of your workbook for people to view. That's what we're going to do in this movie with our completed Red 30 projected revenues workbook here, R30 revenues '03 final. Again, that's in your chapter 3 folder of the exercise files. This time, let's go up to File and go down to Share. This is the same as clicking the Share button. I just wanted you to see it. And then down below, you can see we can send our Excel workbook via email by using the Excel workbook option. But if we want to attach a read-only copy, we can go to the send a PDF option, which will convert it for us on the fly. Let's do that. So as we click this, some things are happening now in the background. First of all, Outlook, if it's not already running, is launched and a new message is created. And you can see a PDF version of your workbook is already attached. All you need to do is type in who you want to send this to. I'm going to send it to Karen again. There she is. And then down below is where we add our message. I'm going to type in, here are the projected numbers for 2019, just to keep it short and sweet. And I'm logged in as Victor, and I'm ready now to send this off. Beauty of this is that I didn't have to go in and convert it to PDF first, find the file, attach it to an email that I had to create in Outlook. It's all done right from within Excel. You can see how fast and easy that is thanks to those options under Share. There's still times when we need a hard copy of our workbook here in Excel in Office 365, and we'll need to know some of the options when it comes to printing. That's what we're going to explore in this movie with our completed Red 30 projected revenues workbook, R30 revenues '03 final. Now, you may have noticed when we decided to send an attachment in the previous movie as a PDF, some lines in the background started to show up. And that's just showing us where page breaks are, the edge of the page, and how our workbook, or in this case, our single sheet in our workbook, will appear on multiple pages. We'll really see this when we go to print as well. Let's do that by going to the File tab and selecting Print. From here, you'll need to select your printer, and then there are some options down below that are going to work in our favor if we want to make this easy to view after it's printed. Let's start with what we see down below here, the orientation. If we were to turn this on its side, maybe it wouldn't get cut off at June. We're not seeing everything here. Remember that dotted line we saw in our workbook? Well, that's where the page broke off, and there's the rest on the second page. And that can be cumbersome to work with. So let's try changing the orientation to landscape. Turn it on its side. And you can see in our preview here, we're still working with 2 pages. Gets cut off now at September, and if we use the navigation arrows down at the bottom to go to the next page, there's still a little bit showing up on page 2. So another option might be to narrow the margins, for example. That's one of the settings you'll have access to here in Excel. The normal margins appear at 0.7 on the left and right. But if we click this, there's a narrow option which uses 0.25 right. But depending on your printer, that might get too close to the edge. For example, some inkjet printers will not print that close to the edge of the paper. So I'm going to leave it at normal. And another option is to scale it. At the bottom, the scaling drop down, when you click it, gives you some fitting options. You can see fit entire sheet on one page. We could also choose to fit all columns on one page, which would work nicely for our sheet here because the number of rows don't exceed the length of the paper. This is more useful when you have a spreadsheet that has many, many rows that won't fit on a single sheet of paper, but the number of columns, if you squeeze them in, might. You could do the opposite here as well and fit all rows on one page, even access some custom scaling options. But typically, if you choose one of these like fit sheet on page or fit all columns on one page, I'm going to go with all columns. You can see everything's shrunk down ever so slightly to make it so that everything fits on this one sheet. That looks good. And now I'm ready to print. I can set the number of copies. I'm going to print out a couple of copies of this. You click the print button and off it goes. If you're not quite ready, just hit your back button to go back to your sheet. Now, when you're printing, you may have multiple sheets, or you may just want to print a portion of your workbook, maybe just this data. When you select content and go back to File and then down to Print, you'll also notice that under Settings here, we have the option to print active sheets. That's the sheet we're working on, and that's the preview we see, or maybe the entire workbook if we had multiple sheets, or maybe it's just what we selected a moment ago. By selecting content and then coming to Print Selection, you can see the preview is a little bit different. It's just our data. The remaining options are still available to you when printing selected content. So there's many ways to get a hard copy of your workbooks, sheets in your workbooks, or even selected content for those occasions when you need to print. Congratulations, you've reached the end of this course on learning Excel in Office 365. You now have the foundation of Excel knowledge you need to feel comfortable creating your own spreadsheets and performing some basic calculations and formatting with this powerful spreadsheet program. If you feel like you're ready to take things to the next level with Excel, LinkedIn Learning has you covered. Check out Excel 2019 and Office 365 Excel Essential Training courses that'll take you way past the basics we've covered here in Excel, diving deeply into many more of the powerful features and functions of Excel. And stay tuned to LinkedIn Learning for more advanced Office 365 Excel courses to get you up to speed with advanced formulas and functions, charts and graphs, pivot tables, and a whole lot more. Thanks for watching.
Okay, class. Any questions so far?
Wala po.
Naiintindihan ba
Opo.
yung discussion dun sa video?
Opo.
Okay, so continue na tayo.
Opo, sir.
Being efficient at Excel is considered one of the most incredibly beneficial and indispensable skills that you can offer your team. Excel, being as widely used as it is vital to the functioning of most workplace environments. It provides an extensive set of features for managing and analyzing data. In my LinkedIn course, I'll cover Excel's menu system, how to create formulas and use simple functions, how to format your data, how to use printing and charting capabilities of Excel, and a lot more. So join me, Dennis Taylor, as we get started with Excel Essential Training for Office 365. If you're just getting started with Excel, or maybe you've been using it a little bit, you probably have asked yourself, what is Excel all about? What is it used for? One way of looking at Excel is that it's just a giant grid of columns and rows, but you're more likely to hear Excel described as a spreadsheet package, and that it is, but it's that and a lot more as well, as we'll see in some upcoming examples. At the bottom of the screen are different tabs here. These are called worksheets. The current one's empty. I'm going to click on the one called profits. A lot of people would call this a spreadsheet. That's a term widely used, although in Excel we don't use it formally and officially. We've got some budget numbers here. You can see what's happening based on the headings over in column A. Here's a bigger budget. It's a prediction for the following year. All kinds of formulas in here that we're not seeing right now, but lots of information. And I've seen bigger ones than this too, and you probably will too eventually. Other people use Excel for keeping lists. Next sheet over shows customers. This might be hundreds, even thousands of rows. You might be tracking your inventory, or you might be tracking sales or transactions. There are all kinds of reasons for maintaining lists. And Excel provides lots of great data management tools for handling them. The next list over is a list of your employees. It's got a table feature applied that makes it easier to work with. The next sheet over, called chart, reminds us that in Excel, we can take some numbers, which for some of us sometimes are a bit boring, we can turn them into a chart. And that happens very quickly too. And there are all kinds of variations on how you can create charts and quick ways to get there too. There's a great analytical tool called a pivot table. You might have heard of that. Got a giant list over here. And we're trying to make some sense out of it. Within a few seconds, you can create a list like what we're seeing on the right that analyzes the data by region, the products, and so on, the customers. You look at those various column headings over on the left, and you can see how we could quickly come up with these. And you don't even have to write any formulas. And if that were not enough, there's some smart art features like this organization chart on the right. There are about 200 variations, not only on the organization chart, but things like Venn diagrams and production charts, that sort of thing. Got a specialized title over here in the list. So there are lots of different applications for Excel. It's used throughout the world for a variety of different purposes. It's probably the most widely used software package in the world. It's a great tool, and in this course, you'll be learning more and more about how you can use Excel in so many ways. Excel's menu system at the top of the screen consists of a series of tabs, home, insert, page layout, etc. And on below that, a bunch of icons, and sometimes we call these commands too. The entire menu system is referred to as the ribbon. And actually a part of it, although sometimes we think of it as being somewhat isolated, above this is something called the quick access toolbar. At the moment, it's quite small. We'll talk about that in a bit. As you work with Excel, you need these buttons often. Now, you certainly don't need every one of them. Some of these you'll never use. The Home tab is likely to be present on your screen much of the time. As we work with data, there's bold, italic, lots of buttons here. As I click Insert, we'll see a whole new series of buttons. And in some of these, you can just see by the names what they involve. Pivot tables, a bunch of chart icons here, something called spark lines, filters. Lots of choices there too. Page layout, as the name suggests printing perhaps, getting ready for printing. Formulas has, of course, a lot to do with formulas and how we use them and track down by way of auditing. Built in 450 of them in Excel are referred to on these various buttons here. And many of you will be using these a lot. The Data tab has a lot to do with data management tools, foremost of which is sorting. A lot of people will be doing filtering as well. And some other tools over here, like an exciting feature called Flash Fill, and another one for getting rid of duplicates, that sort of thing, adding subtotals. The Review tab, as the name suggests, spelling check, for example. We can protect worksheets out here, workbooks if we wish. There's a View tab for changing the way that we see the data. Add-ins you might or might not use, ignore that one for the moment. And an expanded help system with lots of opportunities here for tracking down information on something you need to know. The one tab here that's quite a bit different from the others is the File tab. This takes Microsoft calls the backstage view. It has more to do with the externals, how we open and close and save files. You'll also notice that print is in here as well too. And as you make choices here, of course, the screen will change. If you want to go back into the standard display of Excel, we either press Escape or that leftward arrow at the top of the screen. The Quick Access toolbar up here is designed for you to modify it if you wish. It's got 3 buttons in it initially, a save, an undo, and a redo. But the idea is for certain buttons that you might use often, so that you don't have to go to a particular tab to find them, you can also make a copy of them and put them on the Quick Access toolbar. So an example, I'm going to click Insert here. Suppose I work with pivot tables a lot. I want that button on the screen here all the time. I don't want to have to go to the Insert tab necessarily to get it. I'll simply right-click Pivot Table, and you can do this with any button here. Right-click, add it to the Quick Access toolbar. So the next time I'm working with my data, I might be on the Home tab doing some formatting there. I might be on the Data tab doing some sorting. But if I want to get to Pivot Table, it's right there. It's always going to be there. And you'll find that you'll want to place certain other buttons up there as well, too. If at a later time you say, I don't use that very much, you can certainly right-click it and remove it. That's going to be very handy as you work with Excel. So once again, without getting intimidated, recognize this is a powerful set of features here. We refer to this as the ribbon, tabs on top of icons, and you'll be using many, many of these, particularly on the Home tab. Because Excel has so many command buttons in the ribbon menu system, at times you can't find the command. You're not sure which tab to click, and then where's that button that I need here? What's really helpful is what we call the shortcut menu. Anytime in Excel, when you use the right mouse button, you get a pop-up menu, and sometimes you will also get what's called a mini toolbar. Now, I might want a new row between rows 6 and 7 here, and I'm not sure where to find this. I think they use the term insert. Imagine that little scenario. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab up in the ribbon. I'm going to look around here, and I will not find what I want because it's not there. How am I supposed to know that? So what I'm going to do, and here too, maybe it's guesswork, but I'm going to right-click on row 7. This is the actual row number here. I'm going to right-click. And what pops up here is an abbreviated list of commands taken from the main menus. They're not necessarily all from the Home tab. Here's some different choices here. Microsoft has programmed this feature to bring up only the commands that most users are likely to need at this point. And right above it is what we call the mini toolbar. Now, I don't need to do any formatting right now, but if I wanted to make all those cells bold, I can do it right here. I don't have to go up to the top menu anywhere. So I just did that. I'll right-click again on row 7, and I think it is Insert, and this will push all the data down. I want to insert a new row, and that happens. Now, the right mouse button is context sensitive. If I highlight some cells like this and right-click, we're going to see the mini toolbar there, and certainly some of these commands we saw before are there, but there's some others as well too. So it's a slightly different list of commands there. So it is context sensitive. And although maybe it's premature for some of you, you haven't worked with Excel just yet, if I go to one of the sheet tabs at the bottom and right-click one of them, that's a completely different set of features related to worksheets within an Excel workbook where we can add new ones. And you can see some of the terms and probably guess what a lot of them mean. So that right mouse button is really handy, not only for the commands that it offers you, but when it comes time to formatting, that mini toolbar puts those buttons close to where the action is, you might say. If I right-click a column at the top of the screen, I'm right-clicking column D. We would expect to see Insert here, just as we did on a row, and we see some similar commands like we saw before, but this time Insert would mean insert a new column. I don't want to do that here, but if I did, that's where I would go. Many commands in Excel are like this in that you don't really have to go into the menu system. You can use the right mouse button. And even if you right-click one of the buttons that we see up on the ribbon, here's one here. If I right-click this, there are some choices. Turns out I don't want to do any of these right now, but once again, that's the same basic idea. Using the right mouse button brings up a shortcut menu. And I think you'll find it absolutely vital as you work with Excel to be using that many, many times. You just can't remember all those commands and where to find them. So it's really invaluable as you work with Excel. The exercise file that we're using for this movie is at the top of the screen, O1 examples. In Excel, there are certain terms that we must use consistently. This workbook is called O1 examples. A workbook is a file is a workbook, and nearly always in Excel, we can use those two terms interchangeably. Every workbook has at least one worksheet. And if we were to create a new workbook, we'd see one sheet in it. We can add sheets, we can take them out. And at the bottom of the screen here, we can see in this workbook, there is a sheet 1 tab, but also a tab for profits. And you can see the other names, 2019 budget, customers, and so on. And we can add many, many sheets. As you can see, we can have color as well too. So we never want to make those terms be used interchangeably. Every worksheet has exactly the same number of columns, the same number of rows. On my keyboard, I'm pressing the right arrow here. As we see this cell moving across the screen, we see the column letters. These are columns, are vertical, and they're identified by letters. And after we come to the letter Z, you see how the lettering scheme starts all over again with A, B, and so on. And to get to the far right, and normally we won't need to do this, I'll hold down the control key and then press right arrow. It takes us all the way to the end. That's the last column. And if you were to figure that out, it's well over 16,000. How do we get back to the upper left corner? We hold down control and press the home key. Moving down on the left-hand side, it'll take us a very long time to get to the bottom because the rows, which are always horizontal and numbered, here I will hold down control like I did before, but this time down arrow. How many rows are here? Well over 1 million. Now, you don't have to use them all. In fact, most people don't even come close, and why would you? But it's there anyway, and all worksheets have that attribute. How do we get back home? Upper left corner, control home. And that location, by the way, has a name. And every one of these cells, whether you use the arrow keys to get to this cell, that cell, or you slide the mouse around and click with the left mouse button, that's a different cell. Every cell has a column and row location. This cell is in column C, row 4. Therefore, we call it cell C4. And if there's any doubt, look right above the main body of the worksheet here. This is called the name box. That's cell C4. This is D2. This is F2. And these addresses become very important, particularly as you start to work with formulas. So all these worksheets are the same initially. And as I just click on a different sheet at the bottom, you can see how the column widths have been varied on some of these. I didn't change the row height on any of these, but that can be done too. And you can see certainly different column differences here. So every Excel workbook is a file is a workbook, and a workbook has multiple sheets, and they all have, at least initially, the same layout. Those are features we keep in mind as we work with Excel. Excel's built-in help system is substantial, and it's available in a variety of ways. You simply can slide over a button. Here's a button here on the Home tab. What does that do? Fill color the background of cells. And this is true of any button we slide over. If there happens to be a keystroke shortcut, here's one for underline. We'll see it, Control U. And at times, going back to this fill color bucket, I'm interested in this. How about tell me more? And this activates a dialog box on the right side of the bits of information. This might be sufficient. I might type in something different up here or something related to get even more information. Let's say this meets my needs. I'll just close that. So that's certainly one way. And keep in mind, as you slide over some buttons, you get a graphic and sometimes a longer description. There's at least one of these on the data tab here that's quite long, and this isn't necessarily typical, but certain features here. Here's one about removing duplicates, text to columns. It really gives you some insight into the various buttons. So that's really handy. You can also click on an area above the icons called Tell Me What You Want to Do. Just click in there and type in, for example, create chart. As I'm typing this, it even senses I'm ready to do that in this case. Create chart. Okay, looks good. Great names. There it is right there. Click that, gives you some information on that. And that will vary too, depending on where you are on the worksheet. That's handy. And what do we see here? An actual tab in the ribbon called Help. And this is newly redesigned, and there are lots of features here. Clicking Help here activates that dialog box on the right side of the screen. You can also get to here at any time by pressing the function key F1. Maybe I'm interested in formatting. I could click here. And one of these likely is to meet my needs. I'll click there. If not completely self-explanatory, I think you can quickly get the idea as to how you can get help here. There's an option here for feedback if you wish. You can communicate with Microsoft indicating that you like a certain feature or don't like it, or I have a suggestion. And there's a broad community of users, and you can go to some of the various options here. This might lead you into an external site where you can provide or get more information on some of the features in Excel that you're interested in. And here's one called Show Training. And eventually this would lead you into potentially one of the courses like you're watching right now by way of LinkedIn Learning. And what you'll see out here, for example, if I click Cells, and a short video right here giving us information on this particular feature. So there's no shortage of different ways to get help and command. Remember, you can press the function key F1 at any time. You can go to the Help tab in the ribbon, clicking some of these buttons, or you could click in the panel just to the right of Help, tell me what you want to do, and type in the feature that you're interested in. So that's going to be really helpful as you work with Excel. No question about it. Data entry is one of the most basic things we do in Excel, and at times it can be boring, but there are some techniques, some shortcuts, and a feature called autofill that are really going to help. Before we do this in this particular worksheet, it's called data entry. It's an empty sheet. We're in the workbook O2 entering data. In the lower right-hand corner is a slider bar. There's a black rectangle there. If you hold down the left mouse button, you can zoom in or zoom out. We're only going to be using about 7 columns here as we build a small little worksheet here. So that's good enough. I'm going to be putting in some data in cell A2. I can either click on A2 or use the arrow keys to make that cell become the active one. I type sales. Notice it's on the left-hand side of the cell. That's what happens automatically in Excel unless you're typing values. I press enter. I could press tab to move to the right. I can press any of the arrow keys. I'm moving down a column, so I'll press enter. And then type overhead. And enter. And then profits. Enter. A bit later, I decide to change overhead to the word expenses. I'll click there. We don't have to erase it. I'll just type right over it. Now, maybe I spell it the British way, the Canadian way. That's okay, but later I decide to change that. We don't have to retype it, although that's relatively short. To edit a cell, you can either click on it and then go into the formula bar, click in the appropriate spot, make some changes, or you can double click near the entry and do the editing right in the cell. I'm going to double click behind the C, double click, backspace, S, and enter. I'm going to be putting in some numbers, and caps lock has just been on maybe. The number I'm going to type is 120, and I happen to press O instead of 0. They're right next to each other on the keyboard. I tab over 160, typing this one correctly, tab, and you can see the difference. Numerical entries in Excel, when entered, always are right aligned. We learned that way back in the 2nd grade before adding and subtracting and eventually multiplying. Let's just do this all over again. 1, 2, 0. If it's not purely numerical, or if it's not a formula, Excel will left align it. Numbers are right aligned. All right, I'm going to be putting in 4 numbers, and as I move to the right here, I'll be pressing tab. So I type the 160, tab, 210, tab, 250, tab, 325, and 440. And after the last entry, I'll press enter. And then 6 more numbers here, starting in cell B3. And then pressing enter after the last one. I'm going to be putting in monthly names across the top, so I'll type January and tab over. Now, a shortcut that you wouldn't know about falls under the heading of autofill. Anytime you have a month spelled out or a 3-letter abbreviation, you can point to the lower right-hand corner of that cell. That's called the fill handle. Notice how the mouse pointer changes its shape, becomes thinner. Holding down the left mouse button, I'm dragging across. Those little pop-ups below suggest what's about to happen. We'll get the other months. We can drag all the way out to December and even beyond. It'll start over again. And we can do this in a variety of different ways. You can start with any month you want, and you can use a 3-letter abbreviation. If I type in JUL and then point to that lower right-hand corner and click and drag, you probably have guessed already what we're about to see here. Same thing happens rightward. If you drag rightward or downward, same thing happens. If you drag upward, I'll drag upward from here. We go backward in time. Same thing happens if we drag leftward. So you quickly get used to that. It also works with days of the week. And also, we can use the letter Q and the number 1 in a variety of combinations. And you can actually use any of the numbers 1 through 4 because Excel only cycles through those numbers as we use that feature. And of course, we're meaning quarter. And the same thing works with QTR and any combination of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the word quarter in that same combination of 1, 2, 3, or 4. So these are handy techniques. And of course, these are often used for column headings and row headings. So some shortcuts with autofill and just some basic thoughts and ideas about how we do data entry and editing in Excel. Excel has a great deal of computational capability when you work with dates and times. On this worksheet called Dates Times in the workbook 02 Entering Data, there's a date in cell B2. It's got slashes in it. It refers to August 10th, 2018. In different cultures, you can display these differently so that the day is first. Now, anytime you're entering dates, you want to use slash or dash. If I type this same entry with a dash, 8-10-18, enter, I'll get the same display. Anytime you use slash or dash, Excel evaluates that information as if it could be a date. And if it is, it's on the right-hand side of the cell. If you type a date that doesn't exist, for example, November 31st, I'll even type in the 4-digit year here. When I press enter, Excel does something a little different. But the difference here is so subtle you wouldn't notice it. I do recommend in any column that has a date, from time to time, particularly during the data entry phase, keep that column a bit wider. I'm going to drag the boundary between B and C to the right, and that pops out. That is not a date. In effect, Excel is saying that's just a bunch of characters. Behind the scenes, and you don't need to know too much about this, but every single date has a separate value, starting January 1st, 1900. And that means when you're entering this is actually a value. That's partially the reason why this is right aligned. And because it is a value, you can write formulas that refer to this. Or if you have two different dates, you could subtract them to calculate the difference. I think you can recognize how important that is in banking and finance and all kinds of different endeavors. If I write a formula right here, and I know some of you haven't yet worked with formulas, I'm going to type equal B2, that's this cell, plus 100. I'm going to be getting a date that's 100 days after August 10th. And there it is, November 18th. That's 100 days later. The formula adds 100 to it. And I just as easily could have subtracted that 100 also. When you work with times, enter them with colons. Now, you may choose to type AM, PM. If you're more familiar and prefer that style, you would type this same entry here as 4:43 space P. And of course, if we're AM, space A, so on. So you can use either style, and you can adjust them or switch when necessary as well, too. And here, too, behind the scenes, you actually have entered a value. It's a fractional part of the day. So if you were to type in, for example, 6 p.m., that's 3/4 of the day. The number 0.75 is being stored in the background. Maybe a little bit of trivia there, but still, as we enter these, and we do them in a standard way, using colons for time and using slash or dash with date, we will be able to work with these times and dates in a productive way. And on the formulas tab in the ribbon, there are a whole bunch of functions related to date and time. We can calculate working days, net working days, not counting holidays, all kinds of features here related to dates and times, because it's a vital ingredient in many an Excel worksheet. When working with Excel, sometimes you'll make a mistake. I know I do. And from time to time, we've got a real life-saving feature available. It's called undo. It's got a companion called redo. So imagine I'm a novice user of Excel. For whatever reason, I've got these cells highlighted, and I want to get rid of the word sales. If I have to do that, I can type over it. But I'm thinking that's the only cell there. If I press delete, shouldn't it get rid of the word sales? It looks different than the other ones to the right. I press delete. Well, obviously, that's in retrospect. I don't want to do that. So what do? Two different ways. There is a keystroke shortcut, Control Z. I could press that now. At the top of the screen in the quick access toolbar, you will have an undo button. It's a counterclockwise arrow. When you slide over it, you'll see the word undo followed by the action that was taken most recently, in this case, clear. And notice keystroke shortcut. So I'll click it. And undo can remember up to 100 of your last steps. Now, it's highly unlikely you'd ever want to go back that far. And most Excel users, I think, only occasionally go back 3 or 4 steps. If you undo more than you wanted to undo, the category to the right here is called redo. Now, I just undid the clear, but I just undid falls into this category of redo. So I could undo the undo or redo, do it that way. The keystroke shortcut for redo is Control Y. Now, as it turns out, of course, I wouldn't want to keep that, so I'll press Control Z or that undo arrow at the top of the screen. So it's a really handy feature. It doesn't work for every single command, although it works for most of the commands. I'd say well over 90%. One category of commands that you can't undo relate to sheet tabs. Now, you might not be too familiar with these, but at the bottom of the screen, if I right-click on the current worksheet, which is called Undo Redo, I could delete the sheet, and I cannot undo that. Rename, but I can come back and change the name. So these features don't fall into the category of actions that we can undo. And there are also some features on the View tab, like freeze panes. Some of these we can't undo, but we can certainly take other actions to, in effect, come back to the same place that we want to come back to. So it's a valuable feature, and no question, at different times we make mistakes, and undo, and to a lesser extent redo, are really valuable. There could be one example too, where you might create a chart that looks a certain way. You'll change the chart. You might want to sort of bounce back and forth between the two. Sometimes use Control Z and Control Y back and forth. It's kind of a toggle, or you could be using those buttons as well. But no question, a feature you'll use widely in Excel. When you start using Excel, you're likely to see a screen something like this. And if you choose blank workbook, you'll have a blank workbook. It's likely to have a name like book 1, sometimes book 2, book 3, if you create other workbooks later. Now, I'm going to put in a minimal amount of data here. I'll type in sales right here, and expenses, and then profits. And right here, I'll put in January and drag that off to the right. I'll get to the numbers later, and I'll zoom in. That slider bar in the lower right-hand corner, drag that to the right. Now, periodically, when you work with Excel, you need to save your work. If there's a power failure right now, or if I accidentally turn off the computer, I've got to do this all over again. And what if I had filled in a lot of numbers here and formulas? What if it's a lot bigger and I haven't saved? When it comes time to save, though, you go to the File tab. There are two commands. Which one should we use, save or save as? If there's any doubt whatsoever about which command to use, always use save as. I'll use it here, but when you're saving a file for the first time, it makes no difference which one because they both take you to the same location. When we go to save as, your screen might look something like this. Again, there could be some differences here. I'm going to click Browse. The three things that we are concerned with when we save a file is where are we saving it? Is it on a flash drive? Is it on a hard drive? Is it on a network somewhere? Some of the previous choices out here could have led us down some of those paths. But if there's any question whatsoever about where we're trying to save it, or what the name of the file is going to be, or what the format of the file is going to be, that's when we want to use file save as. And again, the first time you use file save on a file that has not been saved at all, you're led here anyway. We need to give it a name. Book 1 isn't very descriptive. The name can have up to 255 characters. Stay away from most of the special characters. Dash and underline certainly work, but not slash and asterisk and most of those. So we give it an appropriate name. Maybe I'll call this sales report. And you can have spaces in the name as well too. Rarely, but occasionally, you might need to save this in a different format. I click the drop arrow to the right of where we see Excel workbook. Now, there could be situations where you need to save your file in a format readable by someone who has an older version of Excel, or you've got some kind of a Macintosh need here, or something that meets one of these other needs. We don't. And for most people, that's never a concern. Where we want to save it, again, screens will look different, but it might go into this folder or that folder, and you can scroll up and down and see various locations as to where you might want to save the file. We've given it a name, we click save, and that name appears at the top of the screen. Well, imagine we put in some more numbers. I'm not going to do any more typing here, but we've done some more of this and we need to save. What we really mean most of the time after saving a file for the first time is we don't see that term in the menu, but we can go to File Save and simply do that. Automatically, this is updated. Even better and slightly faster is the icon on the left side of the Quick Access toolbar, Save. Notice it has a keystroke shortcut, Control S. If you've got lots of data on your screen and you click that, there's a slight pause and you'll see an indicator at the bottom of the screen, and then the file is saved. So most after saving a file for the first time, we're not trying to change its location or its name. We use File Save. At any time we need any of those other three changes, either to the location or the name of the file or the file type, we use File Save As. For many Excel users, writing formulas is one of the most common things they do. Now, many times formulas are straightforward, they're simple, easy to use. They do start with a concept, though, that might surprise you a little bit. We want to calculate profits on this worksheet. Worksheet's called Formulas. It's in the workbook 03, Creating Formulas and Functions. The total here is going to be 20. We're going to be subtracting these two cells. But we don't type 120 or 100. All formulas in Excel begin with the equal sign. And although we can occasionally and want to use external numbers, most of the time we use addresses. We want to say, in effect, whatever is in B2, from that we want to take away whatever is in B3. So we write the formula, and this is one of three major ways to write a formula. We type in the location of the first cell, B2, minus B3. Enter or tab, we have our answer. Another way to type this, so I delete this entry, equal, then use the arrow keys to go to the cell you're interested. Writing a formula this way could be better, but the cells have to be somewhat nearby, otherwise it would take a long time to get there. Minus We press the up arrow, the B3 pops in, enter. And a third way might involve two hands, but equal, this time we'll click on cell B2. Minus, we click on cell B3, enter. Same result in all three cases. No matter how you write the formula though, you want to learn to keep an eye on what we call the formula bar. It's at the top of the screen. In a certain sense, this cell doesn't really contain a 20, it contains a formula. Click on the cell above it. Yes, that does contain the value 100. We keep an eye on the formula bar in much the same way we keep our eye on the rearview mirror in a car. Look there frequently. Now, we want a total in cell H2. If all we knew about formulas is what we previously saw, then we would do something like this. Equal, type or click on B2 plus C2 plus D2 and on and on and on. That is not the best way. Imagine trying to do that for 12 months too. I'll simply press escape. Built into Excel are over 450 functions. There's a ton of them. On the Formulas tab in the ribbon, you can track them down this way. A lot of times you're not sure what you need. There's some math and trig functions, some more out here, some statistical functions, just a lot of them all over the place. The most common function in Excel for most people is probably sum. And like a formula, this begins with equal as well, sum. You don't have to capitalize it. Left parenthesis, you wouldn't know to do that instinctively, but that's what we do. And then we highlight the cells in question, either dragging left to right, B2 to G2, or right to left. Makes no difference. Click and drag across. That notation means all the cells from B2 through G2. And we press enter, and we have an answer. And in cell I2, we need to calculate an average. And of course, that's the total divided by 6. We need to add these up, but we've already done the addition right here. So the formula here is simply equal this cell H2, and the division symbol is the slash that looks like this, not the one that goes in the opposite direction, divided by 6, and enter. And we'll adjust that format perhaps later. Now, when we have formulas in place like this, and although we're not finished with this particular sheet, if I change this number 120, I'll change it to 125. Keep your eye on the 20 down here. It will change. We saw the formula, and these totals and averages to the right will change as well. And you can begin to see how powerful these formulas are and how we can make adjustments at different times. Also, if I go back to cell B3, I'll make a change here. This is going to change the profits. It won't change anything to the right since we don't have anything over there just yet, but sometimes we will see negatives, and that's what happens. The formula is reacting all the time. So in this movie, we've seen different techniques using mouse and keyboard for creating simple formulas. It's a task that's very important as you work with Excel. Many times in Excel, when you see a formula, you also want a similar formula in adjacent cells, either across a row or down a column. And we're looking at a worksheet here called Copy Formulas. It's in the workbook 03, Creating Formulas and Functions. Here's a formula in cell B4. I click on it, you can see in the formula bar, or I can double click it here, you can see it larger. We want that same kind of a formula here. We certainly don't want the exact formula because we get the answer 20. When you copy a formula in Excel, the important concept is you're copying a formula relatively. Now, I'm going to double click this again so we can see it larger. This formula refers to content in column B. If we drag it one column into the right, the column references will get adjusted to be column C. And then going to the right, D, E, F, G. When you copy formulas, they get adjusted relatively. Otherwise, you'd simply be repeating the exact same formula. And of course, the payoff is here, type of formula here, then here, then here. And what if we were doing this for 12 months? That'd be kind of ridiculous, really time consuming. And the way we copy a formula is simply by dragging an entry from that lower right-hand corner. It's called the fill handle. So as I drag to the right from the fill handle into June, right away you can probably see those values are correct. What's this one right here? You can see it in the formula bar, or I'll double click, you can see it larger. So one by one, we have correct formulas. And if we had 12 months, it would be all the more impressive. And similarly, in column H here, here's a formula. What is it doing? It's adding up the 6 cells to its left. Do we want to do that here? Yes, we do. And here, yes, we do. So just as in the examples over here, we were copying, you could say, the relationship. What is this formula over here? What did it do? It subtracts the 2 cells above it. We copied to the right. What does this one do? Same thing, same thing, same thing, and so on. Same general idea here, but now we're moving down a column. So I can simply drag that lower right-hand corner, and we have correct answers there. What does this one say? You can see it in the formula bar, or as I double click, see it better. And similarly, in column I, the function here for average is the cell to its left divided by 6. We want to do that 2 more times. We'll drag that lower right-hand corner downward. So many times when you see a formula, you're likely to want to copy it, as we've seen here, down a column or across a row. And this technique of copying a formula by dragging the fill handle is absolutely essential when you work with formulas in lists the way we're saying them here. We started off seeing only 3 formulas in this worksheet, and we created the other formulas simply by dragging the fill handle. In this list of numbers that we're seeing here on the screen, just at a glance, it looks like a bunch of numbers. These are numbers. All the rest are formulas. So as you work with Excel, there'll be many times when you need to copy formulas like we've seen in the examples in this movie. Whenever you're trying to add up numbers in a column or a row, or coming up with an average of those numbers, you can rely on 2 of Excel's most commonly used functions, sum and average. Now, there's a menu button, there's a keystroke shortcut. They're going to help in your use of these functions. We're looking at this worksheet called Sum Average. It's in the workbook 03, Creating Formulas and Functions. We want a total in cell G2. We want to add up the data. You might have seen in an earlier movie, we could start typing equal SUM, left parenthesis, highlight the data, and so on. Nothing wrong with that, but there's a better way. There's a faster way, 2 faster ways. On the Home tab, in the editing group on the right side, you'll see a button called Auto Sum. If you click this button, Excel looks upward for data, then it looks leftward. In this case, no numbers appear above it, but certainly leftward. We click this button, Excel shows us what it's about to do. We're going to press enter. After using that for a few times, you become a little bit more confident with it. You can speed it up a little bit. You can double click Auto Sum. Click, click. There it is. There's our total. And what has it done for us? It's put in the sum function. If I double click in the cell here as a reminder, you can also see this in the formula bar. We see what it's done. Similarly, in cell B9, we could use that same button. And by the way, that button also appears on the Formulas tab in the ribbon. As I click the Formulas tab, it's on the left side. So it's in 2 locations. It's also got a keystroke shortcut. I'm going to press Alt equal. Looks good. I'll press enter. Same general idea, same approach. Another thought here too, as I delete this entry, if you highlight cells ahead of time, you can either press the Auto Sum button once or Alt equal once. I'll press Alt equal this time, total on the bottom. Could have pressed the Auto Sum button. Sometimes you'll run into a slight conflict, not a major one here. What happens here if you press Auto Sum or Alt equal? Here's Auto Sum, Excel looks upward, but I wanted to add up the data to the left. What do? I'll simply highlight those cells instead. Excel sees that, enter, all set. If we want totals on the right side, in rows 12 through 15, we can highlight these cells. And we'll take one of 2 actions. We'll either click the Auto Sum button or we'll press Alt equal. And in either case, that's it. We don't have to do anything else. That's it. I'll delete that. Similarly, across the bottom, we could do the same thing. And a surprise, perhaps, if we highlight the data this way, in other words, include the empty cells on the right and on the bottom, we can click either Auto Sum button or Alt equal. Either way, we get our totals on the right. So for example, this cell right here is doing what? It's adding up these cells. Same thing down here, and so on. And down here in row 16, we're adding up this way. Cell in the corner is doing this. So that's easy. And here's another action. I'm going to press Control Z. If you wanted an average on the right-hand side, Auto Sum has a little drop arrow right here. And what do we see? Average. Now we're going to be getting an average on the right side and on the bottom. And there are decimals there. Eventually, we would change the format to produce a more standard look. Now, I'm going to make a statement here that might sound a little strange. Never type equal SUM. Well, why not? It's certainly not wrong to type it, and we could fill in other data here. But when you press Alt equal, Excel does that for you. Now, it might, so I don't want to add that up, but I can point to other cells that I do want to add. Maybe I want to add up these cells over here. Point is, you can redirect it. And why type equal SUM when Excel does it for you by pressing Alt equal? So these are valuable tools as you work with formulas in Excel. There's no question that the sum function and the average function are widely used by most Excel users. The auto sum button, it's keystroke shortcut, alt equal, and occasionally use that drop arrow next to alt equal. All these make tabulating sums and averages, and occasionally other functions too, really fast and efficient. In the previous movie, you saw how to use the sum and average functions. On this worksheet called functions, we're about to use a function that you might not need if you're just getting started with Excel, but eventually you are likely to use what is the third most frequently used function in Excel. It's called VLOOKUP. It has a companion called HLOOKUP. And as of late August 2019, a new function being introduced called XLOOKUP actually will replace VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. And the whole idea behind a function like this is to allow you to pull together related information. Now, sometimes when you're doing this, you're working with different worksheets at the same time. In the simple example we're going to show you here, we've got a list in column G of some ID numbers, and we need to associate them with an employee name. And over in columns A through D, we've got a huge list, thousands of rows potentially. And rather than sorting the data and jumping back and forth to try and find these IDs, let's actually use this XLOOKUP function, the new XLOOKUP function. And by the way, that function does, in addition to combining the capabilities of these two functions, it introduces some new efficiencies and also gets over some of the limitations of the other two functions. Equal XLOOKUP. I'm about to type this in cell H2. If you've never worked with functions beyond sum and average, you're a little bit surprised perhaps as you type in a function name, you put in a left parenthesis, you will be seeing some indications as to what is required. And optionally within brackets, some additional features too. This doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but most of the time when you use XLOOKUP, you'll be saying, I've got a value, for example, the one in G2. We can click this or type in G2. We then put in a comma. Now we see highlighted lookup array. Where are we looking? We are looking in column C. And I'll simply, with the left mouse button, click column C, comma. And what are we looking for? We see the pop-up return array. We're looking to find the related information over in column A. And that's all we need to do in this particular example. I'll press enter. You don't have to put in a right parenthesis when you're using a function by itself. I'll press enter. We have an answer.